So welcome to another lunchtime learning from the DBC. Our charter is to help creatives in Australia build sustainable creative businesses. So what we do is offer strategic and practical advice about the business of design. And we do that through mentoring and coaching one-on-one and also in groups. We do a lot of research into the industry and how it's working and how things might help people. So we do that and publish that via our weekly email. If you're not on the list, jump in and get yourself on the list by going to our website. And we've got a series of ebooks and books. So there's a whole lot of stuff that we're doing for the industry. So let's begin by saying that we acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians on the land which we meet and play, the peoples of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present. So today's lunchtime learning, is it viable to specialise in Australia? Content that we're going to cover today, we're going to start with a definition of what it means to specialise. We'll then look at the business case for specialisation, why it's worthwhile. We'll take a look at the types of specialisation that we've observed happen in Australia. And then we'll look at how to actually specialise. And this is based on our observation of what's happening in Australia. And then we'll look at a case study on how people actually got into specialisation and what some of the, one in particular, a good outcome of specialisation. And as usual, we'll finish this off with an action plan to give you some guidelines on how to get further into specialisation. So let's get underway. What does specialisation mean? Okay, so what we know from our observation of the design industry in Australia, and we've tested this out in the UK and the US and Europe as well as a model for the way businesses grow, design businesses grow. We've got about 15,000 graphic design businesses in Australia. That doesn't include all the ones that call themselves digital agencies. But those that are specifically in the visual craft design space. And what we observe with them is they generally have started from a craft base. They started the business because they wanted to practice their craft their own way. They wanted to have their own clients, solve the problems with visual solutions. And that's what they've learned and that's what they practice. And basically, for most of those designers in Australia, that's what they love doing. Now, what we've observed, and there's nothing wrong with it staying just as a craft business. We've seen some very successful design businesses in Australia who just focus on the craft. But then there's a cohort that move into what we call the entrepreneur level. These are people who have decided they want to grow the business. They either want bigger and better clients, or they want to have more designers and employ people. They tend to then start to get into things like business models and business plans, and they're getting very serious about actually making good design and good money. And they're generally starting to branch out into new areas as well. And what we find from those entrepreneurs, as they get further and further involved with their clients, they move into this strategy stage. They become strategists. Typically, it's a design strategist. So it's very much focused on how design is playing out within the business, and they'll develop the strategies for that. Increasingly, we're seeing that some of these people then move to what we call the consultant level, where they actually start to talk about the business strategy, and hence they become consultants. It's interesting, I got an email today for a new MBA being offered for business owners and senior managers. And a major core right through the whole MBA was design thinking. So what that's recognizing is that these people who have this craft skill added to that with some entrepreneurial skill and understanding of strategy, they become consultants, and they know that this is of value to business owners. So what we want to do is track how that sort of happens. The design ladder is a great way to do this. Now, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself to some of you that would have been in these earlier sessions. The design ladder, about 20 years ago, the Danish Design Centre came up with this after surveying about 20,000 businesses across Europe. And they analysed that businesses use design in a number of different ways. So they actually had 4 stages. We've investigated it and looked at how it's working in Australia, and we believe there's 5 stages. The bottom level is design is a commodity. It's really just a process where the client has a set of expectations, does a brief and says, I want you to supply design. The next level, they start to see that design can actually build their business. It can solve a few things for them. And here, the designers that are working at this level, they've built some extra skills in their craft area. And so they're now able to deliver solutions slightly more sophisticated than the lower level. Level 3 is really where we're talking about this. The expertise in the business, the client's business, starts to come into play. So they will understand the way the business operates, so they can start to work as a consultant. And as they do that, they also then start to branch out and start to look at the industry that they're working in. And so that's where they move to level 4, and it becomes a business solution. Design is a business solution. And here the designer understands the client and how their business operates, but they can also link that back into design solutions. They're marrying all that up with a lot of expertise in the industry. Level 5 is where the designer intimately knows the business, and design is integrated into every part of it. This is where the client wants to be a design-led business. And here the designer working at that level has become an industry expert. And really, if you look at the transition here, we've transitioned from just practicing the craft, from the skill level through to an expertise, a level of expertise. And that increasing expertise is what takes you up that ladder. It is also what makes you a specialist. Specialisation doesn't mean that you miss out on everything else. It doesn't mean that you only do one thing. So we've looked at a lot of businesses that have tended to specialise, and we can see what's happening in the business. So about 30% of the work they do is specialised. It comes out of their industry expertise, and it's the passion they have for that industry that shows through. There's about 30% comes from just organic. So bloody good SEO gets you lots of people knocking on your door wanting to use your services. 30% is the transactional work that comes out of those other 2/3. So that's a natural flow on, and it will always be there and should be there because it is actually a good money earner. And about 10% pro bono. Now, the interesting thing about this is what we know from looking at people who have specialised, getting in, taking a look at their P&L and looking at how they've tracked over a period. We know that targeted 1/3 of the work actually generates 50, 60% of the revenue. They're getting far more revenue out of that targeted space. So specialisation doesn't mean you're going to just be working in one specific area. It means you've got expertise in one area that you can sell at a better rate. The business case for specialisation shows us what it takes to actually get into specialisation and why it's of value. Now, again, this has come from us examining the way businesses are operating. So it's not theory, it's actually observed practice. What we see is the people that have specialised generally started showing some thought leadership in a specific industry. They started writing about it, talking about it. They started building a list of clients in that industry because they found their knowledge made it easier for them to attract those new clients. The beauty of the thought leadership is once you start to introduce your thought leadership approach, you actually lessen the competition, because what's happening is the thought leadership is showing people in that industry that you're an expert. So they're not just looking for a craft solution, they're looking for an expert solution. And so the people that are fronting up to them who are just presenting a craft solution drop out. They're starting to look at only those people who are experts, those people who have tended to specialise. And as with all things that are traded or sold, the rarer they become, the less competition, the higher the prices. And we see this. We know that people who are operating at that level 4 of the design ladder are actually getting higher prices for the work that they're doing because it's expert work. It also then makes it much easier to market your studio and grow it. So you know the industry you're after, you know the players that you've got, you know who their peers and competitors are because you've done it as part of that industry analysis. So you've immediately got a prospect list and you've got runs on the board. You can go to them and say, well, look, over here I did this, over here I did that. Your value proposition, your design value proposition is built very much around what you've achieved in that industry. Much easier to market yourself that way than relying on SEO, dragging in anybody and everybody. The other thing about it, and this again is really interesting because this loops around, number 5 loops around to number 1. You learn more. The more you get into it, the more you learn, the more you're picking up just by osmosis, just by talking to people. And you learn it quicker. So it builds on itself, which feeds back into better thought leadership, which feeds back into less competition. You get the idea. So there is a very good business case for specialisation. And at this point, I will say that these lunchtime learnings, we normally sit at around 80 to 100 people. We've got about half of that this time that have registered because design studios in Australia shy away from specialisation. So the fact that you're here positions you better in the marketplace. Just listening to this, just considering specialisation is actually a differentiator for you. Just thought I'd throw that in. Okay, so let's take a look at what we really mean by specialisation by looking at the types of specialisation that we've observed out there. Now, the first point to make is you can't be a branding specialist in Australia. Of the 15,000 or so graphic design businesses in Australia, I would reckon 95% at least call themselves branding design specialists. If you've got that many out there being specialists, it's no longer a speciality, it's a generalist. So branding designers are generalists. It's not a specialist space in itself. However, if you said, I specialise in brand development or design for the hospitality industry, you're a specialist. But the general casting the net and saying, I'm a brand design specialist out into the marketplace with anybody and everybody, you're not a specialist. Nothing to stop you calling yourself that, but the reality is you're not. What we do know is that there's 2 levels of specialisation. So the basic is that skill specialisation. So this is where we see coming out of that craft area and moving into the entrepreneur level, we start to see the skills becoming more specialised. So you've developed, and there's only 4 here that I've listed, but there's a lot more than this, but just it gives you an idea. So if we look at web, you've decided you're going to specialise in web for everybody and anybody. So you've got really good web design skills. You've got that skill level down pat. You've got all the technology behind it down pat. You know all about e-commerce sites and how to build them, and what allows a client to sell more products. You know about the architecture, the user interface, the user experience. You've done all of that work and you know that space. You've moved into hosting because that gives you ongoing contact and control in a way. And you're doing content creation. You might also be doing SEO and SEM, but you've specialised in that space. But that is a skill specialisation. It's not an industry specialisation. And you can certainly make a go of that, but it's not industry specialisation. You can become an expert in those skills, but really, many of your competitors will be claiming exactly the same thing. When you delve into some of the lesser popular areas, so exhibition design and wayfinding, for instance, there's not a lot of businesses that have that skill level. That's a very distinct skill level. And there is a level of distinction in FMCG as well. And again, in hospitality, where hospitality relies as much on the experience of the place as it does on the brand itself. So there are areas there where you can get more in-depth experience, expertise, if you're going to specialise in that way. Nothing wrong with doing that. We know some design agencies who do exactly this, and they do it extremely well. The other one is industry specialisation. So I'm drawing on 3 businesses we know of across the country, and the areas that they work in. So Traffic has offices in Melbourne and Sydney. They're very big in the property marketing space, and they take property and chunk it down to marketing. The other space you've probably come across, the place, and people like Hoyne, who basically own the term place economy. They're breaking down property into subsets, but marketing in property is a specialist area. It has its own set of language. It's had its own processes. It has a hierarchy of who you work with when. It has a whole lot of different players who come into play at different stages. So there's a whole lot to understand in that industry sector if you want to specialise in it. These guys do it, and they do it extremely well. They're going for quite a while, very successful at what they do. Ascender in Sydney, small studio, but owned by a couple of guys who are really switched on. They've identified that they're good in the finance and real estate sectors. And in the finance sector, they have, again, an understanding of the language that needs to be used, the structure of that industry, where you actually can plug in design into the industry and have some impact. So they've made a real study of that space, and they're now recognised in that space within the players, largely in Sydney, in that finance sector. Key to Creative over in Perth is a really good example. So Perth is probably apart from Tasmania, the mainland capital cities. Perth probably runs near to the smallest. Perth and Adelaide are roughly the same size, and both of them are a bit bigger than Canberra. But so it's a small market is the point I'm making. To then take up a sector like not-for-profit in a small market is a gutsy effort. But the guys at Key 2, Creative, have done it. They know the not-for-profit sector in Western Australia very well. They know all the key players. They go to all the events. They're connected to all of them on LinkedIn. And they've got a good, solid business in that space because they're specialised. So there's 3 examples of industry specialisation and proving that it can work. So it can work in a highly competitive space like property marketing. Every man and his dog in design studios is into trying property marketing. Finance is not such a popular area, but it's a very complex area. And then not-for-profit is an area very many studios have tried and can't actually make a go of it. So there are 3 examples of where people have used specialisation to create really good businesses for themselves. So how do we actually go about this process of specialising? So we've learned this from observing people in the industry. What we've noticed, you probably would have heard of a T-shaped person, the person who has a breadth of skills and a depth of expertise for a business. Well, there are T-shaped businesses. And this is the first point to recognise. You have to have a breadth of skills. You've got to have a set of personal skills. You've got to have a set of craft skills, and then skills that are very specific to the industry. So they're the broad ranging skills. Many designers would have those. They're not that hard to acquire. Where the difference occurs is in this depth of expertise, where you've taken your craft and you've developed it to a deeper level to match the needs of a particular client or client sector. And at the same time, you've gone outside of the client, you've looked at the industry sector, and you've developed a whole lot of expertise in that space. So this is craft and knowledge that you've developed in this depth. And it's a model for the way you go about actually getting into expertise, into specialisation. The business management gurus are now talking about pie-shaped businesses. So hopefully you can see the pie symbol in there. And this is where a business says, look, we're going to have a couple of areas that we're going to specialise in because they play off one against the other, they complement one another. We know there's dips in one when there's ups in the others, so we need to put both of them on the go. So what we do is look for that complementary aspect in a pie-shaped business. The way we see it is the safest way is to have a minimum of 2 areas of specialisation. If you're a 1, 2 or 3 person business, 2 areas of specialisation is probably as much as you can manage. But the area we think we should all play is what we call pillars of excellence. So this is an extension of that same idea. And if you, for instance, just take the health sector. So this idea that in a sector there's not enough variation and therefore you don't specialise. This is an example where that's not the case. So, and this we've drawn from our observation of studios. So you could, in the health sector, you could have 3 what we call pillars. So you could have the chemist retail sector where home branded products need packaging design, they need promotion. There's probably catalogues as well, this point of sale. So you've got all of that expertise. Some of that is just general expertise, but when it moves into the medical space, the health space, there's a whole lot more legislation and restrictions placed on it. So you need to have the specific industry expertise to make sure that you comply with all of those requirements. It's a natural extension to say from the chemist retail sector, you're going to do pharmaceutical packaging. So moving a bit further up the chain to where the products are being produced. Again, there's the general industry level skills and personal skills, but you come up against then a whole lot more legislation and requirements in pharmaceutical packaging. There's one designer we've worked a bit with who's extremely good in this space, where he's developed a lot of expertise in getting the required information into small folded pieces of paper to go inside small boxes. So it's a really complex information design process. And he's developed that depth of industry expertise to know what's acceptable and what's not. But he's also developed the craft skills to do that. When you've done those, there's a natural extension to look at other areas. And for instance, private hospitals is one where there is obviously a medical overlap in there. So understanding the terminology, understanding a level of the legislation, which in some ways impacts private hospitals as well. So you could actually be getting, wayfinding for a hospital, package design and point of sale communications for the chemist retail sector, really novel, interesting packaging work in the pharmaceutical area. So the idea that specialisation narrows you down is just not true, as was shown in this example. It's also possible to dive even deeper and have diversity and the ultimate specialisation. And this is through a thing called value chain analysis. So this is the level 5. So once you get up there, this is the way you're talking. This is the type of stuff you're talking about. Every business has a value chain. This is rather arrogantly a development of Michael E. Porter's value chain. We added research and development to it. So it's the 10 activities that happen in any business. And the idea is that you examine the business by looking at where value is added in each of those activities. And so the idea is the designer who has expertise in a business and a sector can go into each one of these 10 activities and show how value can be added. So infrastructure covers the CEO suite, the C-suite, and the legal and accounting. So being able to relate to them is an expertise that comes from knowledge of the business and the industry. Research and development, bringing in skills like human-centered design to help the researchers. Human resources are very straightforward and an obvious one where you're using communication design skills to help the communication within the business. Technology, it's how you actually link the platforms to the customers. And you'll see that also then links into how you do marketing, sales, and service. Procurement, the modern way of thinking about procurement is not let's screw the supplier down to the lowest price. It's let's work with the supplier so we can get a completely unique product developed for us where there are cost savings. So how does the designer work in that process? Brainstorming, human-centered design, application into procurement. Inbound and outbound logistics, how do we get products in the business or materials, raw materials in? How do we convert them into products in operations? And then how do we ship them out to wherever they're going? So that whole understanding, that interaction of those three things is critical. And you get to understand that if you've got that level of expertise down inside that business. Marketing and sales once you're at this level, it's much more than simply producing marketing materials or flyers, brochures, and the same with technology. It's more than just producing the website. But in marketing, you're actually talking to the marketing director about leading indicators. So how do we actually work out what's going to generate sales? Not how we generated sales, but what will. So the analysis is, and it's a human-centered design approach. And the final part, service. So how is customer service or customer satisfaction measured? So you can see there's a level of expertise needed, which is both the skills, honing your skills, your craft skills, to a very specific level, but then also matching that with industry specific expertise that relates to the business. We've got a case study on this that shows exactly how this played out in one business. So looking at case studies, what we found when we examined the people who have specialised, we've taken a look at the process they underwent to get there. And so we want to talk about that. And the first point is to find your ownliness, which is all about your history, experience, and values, and then identify your pillars of expertise. So let's look at how you do that. Ownliness is a concept. If you look up a lady called Milofer, Milofer, Merchant, she was the one I first heard her do a TED talk. I wasn't at it, I saw it on YouTube, about ownliness. And it struck me as just how much it fits for designers working out where they're best placed to go and pitch their services. So by working out your ownliness, you do that. Now, we've done this, I don't know how many times, a hell of a lot of times with designers using a personal journey map. And what the personal journey map does, it unpacks your life history, either full life or a period. It looks at the experiences that you had during that. And it also then looks at how that left you feeling. We then take that and we start to look at the culture that made you. So what was your education? What was your upbringing? What sort of family life have you got? So we're bringing all that in because that shapes you. We're looking at things like, do you have other languages that you know? And we're mapping out your values. Now, if you go through this exercise, you will define yourself. You will get, and it's amazing how much this has helped some people. So one designer we did this exercise with, she was a generalist, new studio, been going about 2 or 3 years. We did a personal journey map with her. Very smart lady, had a lot of experience in the design industry. Out of her personal journey map, this little story came out that I think it was her 12th birthday. Her father gave her a book on compound interest. I think her father was an accountant. But ever since 12 years of age, she'd had this fascination with figures. She's now got a crackingly good business pitching herself into the finance sector. In a very short period, she's won over some major contracts because she used her personal journey map to unlock what it was that was different about her, to then find out what area of specialisation that would fit. And what really worked for her was she got a really good copywriter involved who put together some cracking good copy to go out to the finance sector. But the point was, it came out of a personal journey map. It came out of defining her ownliness. The important point about ownliness is it should be turning up something in you that you can directly relate to the clients you're trying to pitch to. And you don't have to tell them your personal journey map, but just the fact that you're showing a level of interest in what they're doing And they can see that that interest is heartfelt. It is actually part of your values because it is part of you. So the onlyness thing is a really good way to start that process of specialisation. And we've seen it. The next step is to take a look at what we term lagging indicators. So what is it that we've actually gained work from in the past? Where have we gained it? And this is what we put out as a client segmentation form. And what we do is list out all of the clients, what industry they're in, what the revenues are, expenses, profit, the number of jobs for them, the type of jobs, and when they occurred. Pretty straightforward. But what this tells us, just by looking at it, is that these people have two pillars. They've got manufacturing and professional services. Now, we can guarantee they have a great deal of expertise in those two spaces. If you look at the amount of work they're doing for them, the amount of money they're being paid, and how profitable it is, and the regularity of it, what it indicates is they actually know that industry. And when we've done this with people, it's then a matter of unpacking, well, what do we know? What is it we understand about these businesses? Yes, it's sitting in the back of our heads, but what do we actually really know about these businesses? So you then start to translate all of that and take a look at your pillars, and you look at your skills and expertise. So coming out of your personal journey map, you'll get a whole lot of this sort of information. You know, you had a student job at a chemist, so you volunteered in aged care. So they're part of your personal journey that has given you an understanding of the chemist retail sector. And in the private hospitals, you've got a sister that's, and these are not made up, but these have actually come out of a number of customer journey maps. You've got a sister who's a nurse, a partner who's a surgeon, and you've volunteered in aged care. When you start talking, when that designer starts talking to a private hospital administrator or marketing person, and they're bringing out that, oh yeah, my sister's a nurse, she works over at whatever, yeah, and my husband's a surgeon in at, immediately you're connecting, because one of the things that immediately connects is you have a detailed understanding of medical language, which is critical in understanding what happens in private hospitals or any hospital. Pharmaceutical packaging, again, you've got a range of skills that you've picked up along the way. So this is how you're looking at setting up a specialisation. And to give you an example of how we bring all that together, we're back to this design value chain. And this comes out of work a designer did in manufacturing. So this designer had a number of manufacturing clients. They joined a manufacturing network. So most manufacturing areas in most of the capital cities have got a network group. So this designer joined that group and went along to all their breakfasts, met the people, chatted to them, learnt more about what their businesses were, because each breakfast somebody did a presentation. So gained a whole really in-depth, very quick knowledge of the manufacturing industry and in a particular space. And when and the designer got to do a presentation because he was a member of the group. So when this company who they make a building product, a cement render that goes on bricks, on finished houses. When the CEO from that company at one breakfast said to the designer, I think we need to talk to you. We need some more advertising because sales have dropped. Come and talk to us. So the designer went out, had a meeting with the CEO, got the details, immediately went across and said, well, we actually need a bit more information than sales are dropping. So he got the tech guys who had all the access to the data, and the marketing and sales people and the service people together to discuss what was going on. The technology guy could show sales had slumped, that they'd had a period of about 3 or 4 months where they went up. And that was after a massive marketing and sales campaign. So they were marketing out to tradies, who are the people who buy it. Sales went up. After 3 or 4 months, they started to go down. We knew the product hadn't changed, so there wasn't a quality issue because there were no quality complaints. And marketing sales said, yes, that's exactly what's happened. The service person said, well, the complaints we're getting are late deliveries. The area that they targeted was on the other side of the city to the manufacturing plant and the warehouse. So they were having to load up trucks early in the morning, drive through all the city traffic to the other side of the city to deliver this product on building sites to tradies. And they were late. And the tradies were sitting around. So they just stopped buying it. They went and bought it from someone else. So the designer took that finding back to the CEO and said, well, this is where we're at. The CEO got the head of operations in, who was also responsible for inbound and outbound logistics, and said, so, well, this is the problem. What are we going to do? So, you guys are not delivering. And the idea came out that they would lease a warehouse on the other side of the city. They'd use larger trucks, put 2 dumps a week into it, and then just have smaller trucks do quick deliveries each morning out in that area. Sales went back up. The designer got some work out of it because they had to do the building signage. They did some new flyers to get out to the tradies to convince them that they could actually use this service. They set up an over-the-counter sales area which had to be designed. But the designer actually made more money out of the consultation. The time put into solving all of that was billed at a much higher rate than the design work. So that expertise and knowledge in that business, in that industry, along with skills in what was essentially just a human-centered design exercise, that actually gave the solution. So that's a case study of somebody who got right into a business and could come up with a solution. And as is the case with a lot of consultant solutions, they don't necessarily have a visual outcome, but they certainly have a very strong business outcome. Okay, so an action plan. The first start in you going down this path is to actually determine how much expertise you have in a particular pillar. So we've got to the pillars by, first of all, doing our customer journey map. We've worked out where we play best. We've then identified in our own client list where that fits. And we've now got 3 pillars or 2 pillars. And so what we want to do is test how much expertise we have, and are we lacking expertise in any particular area. So we have this pillars of expertise spider graph. There's 16 points on here. In the Slack channel, we will give you this plus a sheet that explains all of the 16 points. So the idea is you're scoring your level of expertise from 1, which is the lowest, to 5, which is the highest, under all of these different categories. So you're reading the description and saying, yep, well, look, in terms of the pricing for the product that this client sells, yes, I've got a price list. I've got a fairly good idea what it costs them, so I know pricing. So you score yourself 5, for instance. So the idea is you would fill this out, and here's a typical example of how it's going to look once you're finished. Now, anything in the 4-5 space, you can consider yourself having a good level of expertise. Certainly 5, you are an expert. Anything below in the 3, 2, and 1, you need to get more information. So in this case, designer has what we would consider an expert level in 10 of the 16 points, which leaves 6 areas where they need to get more information. They need to become more expert in the particular area. And you will, once you get into this, you'll find there's some very interesting correlations between what you know and what you don't know. That, you know, marketing and sales, low level of expertise in marketing and sales for the company probably matches with a low product knowledge as well. So you'll find that there are correlations between these points. But the idea is you prepare this, you've got your pillars worked out. Within the pillars, you've got the clients you're currently working with. You're doing this to just work out where your level of expertise is. Because what you need to do is increase the level of expertise to that 4 or 5 level before you actually move on to trying to get more clients. The interesting thing in doing that exercise is I feel you're likely to get more work from existing clients, mainly because you're going back to them, trying to get this information. So you're seeking out their expertise, or you're researching it. And as part of researching it, you are talking to these people about it. So building up that expertise to a good level before you can go out and call yourself an expert. Then, of course, the question is, how do you explain all of your pillars of expertise to your existing clients and your potential clients? So that needs a communication strategy to show your expertise. Now, the one medium, social medium in this country and globally, I think, that shows experts is LinkedIn. If I had $1 for every person who calls themselves an expert on LinkedIn, I wouldn't be here today. But LinkedIn is the home of experts and it's the home of expertise. It is also the most amazing facility to target your existing connections and to find others. So what you're doing there is you're taking the existing people you have on your client contact list, checking whether you're connected with them in LinkedIn, and you're going off and asking to connect with them. But you're asking to connect with them because you've written an article about some aspect of that industry that will interest them. Now, the article is not, look at this nice branding project we did for XYZ manufacturing business. It is instead great to see sales increase in this sector. The industry research shows us that there's an increase in purchasing of this for this reason, blah, 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 blah. You'd finish off the article with, and you know, we're really pleased to see the work we did with XYZ has helped them on this same path. So you lead by talking about the person you're trying to connect with, talking about what their pains are and what their gains could be. So you're writing those articles, you're going out asking for connections if you don't already have them with your existing clients. You're looking at your existing clients on LinkedIn and the new connections, and you're noting you're noting who else or what other people are being searched by other users. So you'll get the name of the person that you're looking at, their title. Off to the right-hand side, you'll quite often see a whole lot of other people with similar titles in other businesses that have been searched in the past. That's your new contact list. Taking a look at those, going off, doing a bit of research on them, then going and asking for a connection. And the idea, my idea with LinkedIn and doing this is you get out of LinkedIn as quickly as possible and you get into face-to-face. I guess it's a bit like Tinder. The aim of Tinder is to get to your first date. And LinkedIn, you think about it the same way. The aim is to get my first date sitting opposite that client, talking about their business. So that's the aim of it, but you've got to foster that relationship. So that's where the comments and posts come in. So you're constantly looking at what the client is saying, what's being said about them or by them. And you're jumping in and you're finding something meaningful to comment on. It's okay to say congratulations, but you're better off getting in and looking at what they've written and actually rewording some of it in your comment. Posts are somewhere between comments and articles. They're very short, brief bits that you put out that keeps you in front of those clients. The other area to show your expertise is the trade press. So looking at the industry that you've targeted, looking at who the trade press for them is, again, using LinkedIn to seek out the journalists who are associated in that trade press and connecting with them. The aim is to have them see you as an expert, so they'll ask for a quote from you. And even better for them to say, oh, look, I saw this piece you wrote on LinkedIn. Would you like to rewrite it in this vein or that vein? And we'll use it in the magazine. And most of these magazines are online nowadays. And we saw this work brilliantly with, we do a LinkedIn workshop. One of the guys who attended it was in craft beer, marketing, design and marketing. And he went off and he'd been dabbling in LinkedIn. He went off and the first piece he did was a cracker. It was really good. He has a great sense of humour, really good designer. So he did this quirky little piece about the naming of craft beer brands. And 24 hours later, he had the senior journalist from the top marketed craft beer magazine contact him and say, you're obviously an expert in craft beer branding. Can I interview you? So it was a great breakthrough, but it was because he used that trade press appropriately. The other one is, as I mentioned, about that designer in the manufacturing space, is getting out into the networks. There's nothing beats the face-to-face. It's going to build up your expertise quickly. It's going to get you in front of people, which is even better. And it's going to get you the opportunity to set up additional meetings or catch-ups with people. The other networking is jumping back into LinkedIn and looking at many industry sectors have LinkedIn groups, and they're a great source of canvassing for new potentials. And so getting into those groups, joining them, and then being active within the group by comments, posts, and articles will get you noticed in the group, which then starts to build up your standing as an expert in the space. So you've defined your pillars of excellence. You've worked out what it is that is different about you that you can pitch into the people in those pillars of excellence. You've worked out where your shortcomings are in your expertise, in your pillars of expertise, and then you've put together a communication strategy to get out and push your expertise. The key to it all, of course, is you actually have to do it. It's no good getting to this stage and not following through. The progression here in this from LinkedIn to trade press to networking is very much from the virtual through to the real. And I can't emphasize enough how much I've seen people do really well out of that networking end of all of this. Okay, so your action plan to put all of this into place. You've done your personal journey map. you look at your client segments and you identify at least one pillar to start with. The interesting thing about looking at these pillars is that the industry groupings there's an Australian standard for industry sectors. Look that up and use those when you're classifying your businesses, because we've seen people define clients in an incorrect sector. So do that and set at least one pillar. You then research that the industry segment for that pillar, the broader research. So here, Carol and I have just been doing it for one of the people doing our business of design short course, looking at space that he's looking to work in. So we went off and did a whole lot of industry segment research. We always turn to McKinsey, KPMG, Deloitte. Those groups have done a lot of industry research that you can plug into and use to better understand your pillar. Then do a value chain analysis. Work out what you know in those 10 activities for that client to work out exactly where you can see yourself being able to add value. Then look at your level of expertise. By the time you've done all of this, you've actually interrogated yourself about how much you know about that client and the sector. So you define your level of expertise next. You find the gaps in that expertise and you research to fill them. So the research may be directly back with the client, or it may be desk-based research from the web. Amazing how much you can collect there. You're then looking at a list of potential clients in that pillar, and I've described how you do that using the TIM. Prepare your communication strategy, get out and do it. And you've specialised. You're specialised without actually getting into just boring work in one sector. You've managed to increase your return for each client, and you're being positioned as somebody who's an expert, which is obviously also a good thing.